Episode 46, Eugenics in the Fernald School. Quote, he who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as he who helps to perpetuate it. He who accepts evil without protesting against it is really cooperating with it, unquote, said Martin Luther King Jr. Although I saw lots of injustice and misery growing up in Boston, I was not prepared to encounter the most forsaken, helpless children in the world. In 1957, a girlfriend, Mary Dwyer, invited me to visit the Children's Birth Defects Ward at Fernald State School in Waverly, Mass. Mary was a Radcliffe student and a good Catholic. Radcliffe was the women's part of Harvard University. She was very smart and attractive. I was interested in her and wanted to date her. She was not as interested in me as I was in her, but she tested me by inviting me to go along with her on her usual Saturday volunteer day. I thought of it as a date, albeit a weird one. I never thought of the shock that I would experience at seeing those suffering children. She did expressly warn me beforehand, though. There have been exposés done on Fernald and other like institutions in books, films, and on TV. They tell of the terrible conditions in which those unfortunate people were kept in my day. State budget shortages closed many so-called state schools, including Fernald, in 2009. Fernald was a scandal. I never again felt the pathos that filled my whole 18-year-old being at seeing that ward. I was emotionally staggered and stunned. I did not know what to do. I was in the middle of hundreds of twisted and shrunken children born with mental retardation and birth defects. Some had no limbs. Some were missing parts of their heads, an eye, an ear, a nose, a jaw. Some were blind or deaf or mute or all three. Almost none were ambulatory. They were groaning and mewling and gasping and crying and trying to communicate with me. Many were on the bare floor, some in beds, in chairs, or in cribs. Some older children, even pubescent ones, were in diapers or naked. Many were dirty or drooling with feces. Some were urinating on the floor or on other kids. The stench was awful. None of these children looked anything like the kids I knew. They were disfigured and closeted away from public view. This was an institutional callousness never before seen by me. Privacy, modesty, and dignity were not only absent, but designed to be absent. It was so overwhelming for me. My reaction to that misery had a direct result on my future life. I became further pro-life. I was of many minds at once. One, I was immediately absorbed and fully sympathetic to those poor children who were in desperate conditions. Two, I had a difficult time looking at those innocent kids in their wretchedness, and I felt guilty about that. Three, I was feeling impotent to help those poor folks. The whole panorama was so large, so impossible to comprehend, so unsolvable, at least for me. Four, I wanted to run away from the pure devastation of that curtain pulled back scene, and therefore I felt inadequate, weak, and unmanly. And lastly, here was this 110-pound, 5'2", slight young woman wading into that corruption, changing diapers, picking up crying children, wiping piss and shit and snot and sweat from Down's toddlers, loving them all without compunction, while I, the 180-pound, 6'2" macho guy, wanted to flee. I was so ashamed of myself that I never contacted Mary Dwyer again. I have never forgotten her heroic work at that forlorn place and my cowardly reaction to it. That cowardly reaction has informed my former Ayn Randist philosophy. I had been reading and liking Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead by Rand. After that Fernald event, my early objectivist ideas were discarded. I began to consider those helpless pawns of the state in the design of my life's philosophy and plan. I previously thought everyone should be able to lift themselves up by their own bootstraps. That is the crux of Ayn Rand's credo. Some people, yes, but those children had no bootstraps. They had no boots. They had no feet. God made us all. Some people are hard to love, but He loves us all. Christ said that when we see a horribly deformed person, a helpless person, or a despised person, we should see Him. We should love that person and do whatever is possible to help that person, if appropriate. It is not easy to overcome revulsion and fear. I mostly fail, but I do what I should do, and so I try it again accordingly. I like this pertinent quote by Charles Kettering. It's easy to build a philosophy. It doesn't have to run. I found out later that Fernald School, originally called the Mass School for Idiotic Children, was part of the American eugenics movement to keep so-called morons, imbeciles, and idiots from marrying and having similar children. Thousands of these handicapped folks were sterilized, most without permission. It was part of a national program by our self-appointed elites. I will name some of those leaders: Teddy Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, and Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. Sanger called for the immediate, stern, and definitive action to solve the problem of the feeble-minded and the menace of the moron. She regarded those as the dead weight of human waste. This is eugenics, and there is no worse sin. Eugenics was founded by wealthy Protestant family foundations, the Carnegie Institute, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Harriman family fortune. New England eugenics leaders were Darwinist Yankees like Henry Goddard of Clark University, various Harvard and Yale professors, and Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. Even Edgar Rice Burroughs, the author of Tarzan, was for eugenics. The program was set up to cull what they considered the human flotsam from the wonderful and perfect higher class folks like them. Justice Holmes, in the infamous Carrie Buck decision, wrote the following: "It is better for all the world if, instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime or let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. The principle that sustains compulsory vaccination is broad enough to cover cutting the fallopian tubes. These 3 generations of imbeciles are enough," unquote. The moral insensibility continues to haunt me. These Ivy League educated people can set up such a program in such a place as Fernald. What is next? The Nazis learned from American eugenics leaders. The Germans went beyond the retarded and the handicapped and winnowed out, in other words, killed the despised, useless eaters, the Poles, the Jews, the Gypsies, the homosexuals, the Russians, etc. If our elected and other so-called responsible leaders could give us Fernald, what will stop them from deciding, for instance, that everyone over 70 years old should be done away with? Thank you for viewing or listening to my podcast episode. I really appreciate it. If you liked it, and if you so choose, I ask you to send a good review and perhaps refer friends who might be interested in this podcast series. Again, my thanks.